NDC supporters before the shot was fired into the crowd. However, NDC supporters were jubilating and firing gunshots and throwing firecrackers. Again, it was established without doubt that the bullet that killed the deceased, Samira Zakaria, was a shot from a high-velocity rifle. The same bullet
take steps to prevent the nation on the outcome of the investigations and actions taken so far to bring perpetrators of that violence to book and seek justice for those who are affected. So this afternoon, we deem it number 2 for the Minister for the Interior to brief the nation on the matters at hand and indicate exactly where we stand regarding the violent confrontations of 2020 and 2024. So without taking any more time, I invite right away to the microphone the Honorable Mohammed, the Minister for the Interior. Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister for Government Communication. And let me thank all of you for making it to today's briefing, especially the service commanders and all the people and the security services who have found time today. We are really very grateful for all the sacrifices, the hard work that you are putting to keep all of us safe. We will forever remain grateful to all of you and the sacrifices. And to take this opportunity once again to thank the team from the Ministry of Interior and the media in particular for coming to grace this very important occasion. Let me start by saying that the investigation is ongoing. As many of us may know, it's taking some time, especially that of 2020. It needs some more detailed work to be able to get it done. But we didn't feel that periodically we update the nation as to where we are. So we've submitted the second report to His Excellency. The first one was in June, and we are doing we did the second one 2 weeks ago, and he advised that we update the country where we are. So you realize that most of it is not really conclusive, but it is ongoing. But at least you can see a lot of progress that have been made. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the team, 30-member team from the CID department that have been working tirelessly to ensure that justice is served. So without further time, I'll just go ahead. So Government Communication Minister, the Deputy Minister for Interior, the Acting Chief Director and Minister of Interior, the Inspector General of Police, representatives, members of Command, directors from the Interior Ministry and the Information Service Department, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of us once again. It gives me a great sense of duty to present to you all the outcomes of the report on the 2020 and 2024 election violence which occurred across various centers in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, elections in Ghana in recent times have been characterized by violence in various forms. In 2020 and 2024 general elections, we recorded some isolated incidents such as violence resulting in loss of lives. To address this recurrent and bring justice to the victims, the President, His Excellency Alhaji Mubarak, directed the formation of a special investigative task force to re-examine cases of electoral violence fatalities, identify the causes, hold perpetrators accountable, and propose measures to prevent further occurrence. On January 16, 2025, the Inspector General of Police inaugurated a special task force within the Criminal Investigation Department, CID, of the Ghana Police Service. The mandate of the task force was to collaborate with the stakeholders to identify, review, and investigate all electoral violence cases that resulted in fatalities during the 2020 and 2024 general election. The Special Investigation Task Force identified 12 cases that took place during the 2020 and 2024 general election. These cases had resulted in 15 deaths across the country and well over 40 individuals got injured. The report outlined detailed account of all the 12 cases recorded during the period. The detailed report, which has been submitted to His Excellency the President, also contains the various incidents, how they were brought or got to the notice of the police, and actions taken by investigators in line with the laid down investigation protocol and procedure. The report further detailed action taken when the Special Investigative Task Force took over the cases at level initially investigators had reached, and detailed findings derived from further interviews, interrogations, field visits, reconstruction of crime and crime scene, and forensic analysis of various materials of evidence retrieved during the investigation. Every violent incident recorded during the general election presents various criminal offenses which will have been committed by different persons involved. The report took into account a number of incidents where some procedural actions were overlooked. There were instances of clear breaches of discipline, violation of legal requirement, and total neglect by officers who were either present or responsible for situations that required prompt, responsive actions. The focus is to avoid veering into areas that might confuse procedural breaches with the main mandate, which is to investigate, identify, and prosecute persons responsible for death during the two general elections in the years of the 2020 and 2024. There were also instances of persons being rushed to the court on frivolous and vexatious charges when the same incident had resulted in the death of a person or two. Great effort was expended to distill these charges and identify persons against whom evidence could be produced for the deaths recorded during these elections, with evidence to sustain criminal charges being preferred against them. Through careful review of police dockets, on-site inspections, and stakeholders interview, the Special Investigative Task Force identified 12 specific cases. I must be quick to add that I have since directed that the report of the Commission on the Election Violence at Ayawaso, West Legon, be implemented fully for justice to prevail. 6 each from the 2020 and the 2024 general election, which collectively led to 15 deaths as mentioned earlier and injured 14 others. These incidents span multiple regions, including Bunu East, Greater Accra region, Bunu region, Northern region, Central region, Savannah, and Asante region. The circumstances of each case vary, but nearly all involve the use of firearms during confrontation between supporters of the two major political parties, and instances where security personnel resorted to the use of live ammunition, warning shots as means of crowd control. Investigation into one of the cases during the 2020 general election at the was completed. The Attorney General is currently prosecuting 3 persons who are standing trials at the High Court Criminal Division, Accra. The investigation established that 3 of the cases resulting in 4 deaths are traceable to the use of firearms by armed police patrol teams. Military personnel were also found to be responsible for 3 of the cases resulting in the death of 3 persons when they intervened to restore calm to chaotic crowds. Investigation further established that 4 of the cases, which resulted in 5 deaths, were recorded when party enthusiastic supporters resorted to the use of firearms against their opponent. The 2 other cases involve persons who were lynched during confrontation between supporters of the 2 major parties. It is worth noting that 21 suspects have been identified through witness interview, scene visit, reconstruction of crime and crime scene, and forensic and ballistic examination of material of evidence relevant to the cases. 11 new dockets have been built on the cases. 4 of the identified suspects have been arrested and admitted to police inquiry base to facilitate further investigation and to trace their accomplices. 5 other identified suspects have been remanded in prison custody. Warrants of arrest have been procured to facilitate the arrest of some of the identified suspects who are on the run. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, the 2020 investigation reports are as follows. Techima South, that's Techima South constituency in Techima. The observation of the task force are as follows: that the injury could have been avoided had the security personnel not resorted to the use of live ammunition for crowd control. The use of firearms by security personnel was not done under the command of a senior officer who could have ensured that appropriate rules of engagement were observed. Security personnel, especially the police patrol teams at the collation center, fired indiscriminately, and in some cases they directed fire at the escaping crowd. Spent shells could not be retrieved from the scene. As indicated, the recommendation from the task force was that the crowd control response of security personnel by resorting to the firing of live arms and also directing fire at the escaping crowd is not acceptable. The victims of the gunshots have suffered injuries that caused them pain, loss of resources for treatment, as well as income. Families have also lost breadwinners. The state should take steps the state should take up the responsibility to compensate the families who lost their breadwinners, as well as those who suffered injuries. Police should receive orientation and desist from using lethal force in crowd control situations. Appropriate crowd control gear should be provided to security services. Party executives, officials, and persons involved in election management should be well educated on the provision of the Anti-Vigilante Act 2019 Act 999. Action taken so far on the Techima. The report has been forwarded to the Attorney General for the compensation to be given to the families of the deceased and the injured. Dockets of the case is also referred to the cold case unit of the CID police, meaning that the investigation will continue further until they are able to find the actual perpetrators. For the Odio constituency in the Greater Accra region, the observation of the task force, special task force, is that investigations into the incident failed to identify the person who shot and killed the deceased, Richard Otu and Emmanuel Dompre. However, 3 identified persons by police as those who fired shot into the crowd and injuring them were charged with the offenses of conspiracy to commit murder, contrary to the Section 23(1) and 47 of the Criminal Offences Act 1960 Act 29, and attempted murder, contrary to Section 48 of the same Act. They have been committed and are standing trial at the High Court, Criminal Court 1, Accra. The recommendation of the task force is that the task force recommends monetary compensation to the families of the deceased. The injured must abide by the judgment of the court in the trial, after which compensation, if any, may be determined. So the actions that we've taken so far on this is that same report has been forwarded to the Attorney General for the workout of compensation to the deceased family. The docket is also at the cold case unit, since we've not been able to actually get those who fired the shot that killed the 2 citizens. Ablekuma Central, that's Odoko Police Church. The observation of the task force is that investigation revealed that the soldiers were interviewed and showed video of a man dressed in military uniform and reported to be the person who fired, resulting in the death of Abbas Ibrahim, but they maintained that the said soldier was not known to them. The case involved accused Collins Kwegu, alias Kola, who was charged with causing harm and use of offensive weapon is still pending before the Circuit Court 4, Accra. The use of armed military personnel for crowd control duties accounted for the incident that led to the death of 1 person and injured 4 others. Police personnel were present at the center and should have controlled the crowd. Lack of coordination between the police and the military men who were on duty accounted for the situation in which the military resorted to the use of live ammunition to attempt to control the crowd. The incident was avoidable because the agitation and shouting by the party supporters were outside the collation center. The action of police was a criminal offense. The recommendation of the task force is that election security management should be coordinated properly to determine when force is required for crowd control. The use of military in crowd control activity should cease if death resulting from high-handedness of state security are to be avoided. Police and sister security agencies should design, ahead of election, a well-coordinated plan on election security management. There should be controlled use of military. There should be controlled use of live ammunition from lethal weapons as a means of scaring or driving crowd from a particular location. Capacity building is recommended for police and all arm-bearing security agencies whenever required for election security or crowd control duties. Compensation should be paid to the injured and to the family of the late Ibrahim Abbas. The action that we have taken since the report came is to forward that to the Attorney General for compensation of both the deceased family and those who got injured. The docket is also forwarded to the cold case unit of the CID, since that soldier or the one in the uniform has still not been identified. The Banda Ahipro, that's in the Private Boahin Francis, who could not collect this evidence in full since he was trying to pick up the magazine of his M16 rifle, which had fallen during the struggle when he heard the shot. The evidence collected so far does not show that the deceased committed any breach of the law. The military personnel who were deployed to the collation center had a duty to prevent any interference with the electoral process, and they were also required to maintain and restore peace whenever disorder threatened. The recommendation of the task force is that the family of the Abdul Karim Rafiq be compensated for the untimely death of the deceased. Yet the report too has been forwarded to the Attorney General for advice and the compensation because it involves this soldier that is well established that he really fired the shot. So that has been forwarded to the Attorney General for advice. Offensive North constituency, that's Akumadan. The task force realized that the incident led to the loss of 2 persons and injured 2 others. The observation of the task force is that the late Jacob Nalo was not in the group that went to take over the fertilizer in the warehouse. The late Solomon Debel lost his life as a result of stray bullets. The task force, through district investigation, identified 12 suspects as those who attacked and subsequently lynched deceased Jacob Nlo. 5 of the 12 have been arrested and before the Master High Court 4, Kumasi, and are currently in prison custody, yet to meet their bail condition. The others are on the run, and the police is making every effort to get them arrested to face justice. For no southwest, that's Mankranso. The observation of the task force was that a chaotic situation at the collation center caused damage to property and almost brought the collation process to a halt. There was therefore the need for the military men to intervene. However, directing rifle shots at the crowd cannot be an acceptable crowd control method, since it endangers the life of fleeing youth and bystanders, including the late Dominic Nimo, who was standing at a distance. The 4 victims who sustained gunshot injuries deny being involved in creating the chaos. They claim to be standing some distance away when they were hit by the bullet. In a screening exercise, 11 soldiers were identified as those detailed at the constituency center in Mankraso on the December 7, 2024. 8 of the soldiers interviewed admitted firing warning shots alongside the police to disperse the mob, which was attacking the collation center. They denied firing into the crowd and further said that they were not aware that anybody was hit by a bullet during the process. There was no doubt that the late Dominic Nimo died from a shot fired by the soldiers. Similarly, the 4 victims also got their injuries through the same process. The recommendation of the Special Task Force is that the family of the late Dominic, as well as the 4 persons who sustained the gunshot injuries, should be compensated by the state. The report has since been forwarded to the Attorney General for advice and the compensations to the families of the deceased and the injured persons. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it is worth noting that the report has been sent to the Office of the Attorney General for further actions and prosecutions. As Minister for Interior, I want to assure the public that government under the able leadership of His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama is committed to upholding the rule of law and to ensuring that all those responsible for the violence are held accountable. Government will continue to work with all stakeholders to strengthen democratic institutions and ensure that elections in the country are peaceful. God bless our homeland Ghana and make it great and strong. I want to thank you once again, especially the Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that.